Welcome back to my channel. I'm VE Winter. I'm an indie author, baby developmental editor. All my editing services are linked down below, by which my debut novel is coming out 13th of September. Pre-order links are down below. And today we are talking about Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by VE Schwab. So what we're talking about is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil and the importance of representation. So I do bang on a little bit about representation because I think it's important. As somebody who very, very rarely sees myself represented in books, see myself reflected, my experience, my life reflected in books, or having the experience of realizing that's my life for the first time as an adult has informed a lot of how I see literature and a lot of how I see things like representation and diversity in books. Which is why I think it's really important, because growing up I very much felt like there was something wrong with me and my life because I didn't see it reflected back at me. So I think it's really important to have diverse books. And this video is available as a Substack article as well, which is linked down below. So Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by VE Schwab. It's her most recent novel. She's an author I've followed for a few years. The book itself follows 3 women through time as they become vampires. The tagline for the book is toxic lesbian vampires. So these women have to deal with consequences that obviously becoming a vampire tends to bring. We do start in the 16th century with a character called Sabine in Spain. And then we also have another point of view, the character in the 21st century in America. And that kind of frames the book as this conversation between past and present, and showing different attitudes that have changed as well as things that haven't changed. And as I said, VE Schwab, as well as the publisher taking her lead, markets the book as kind of toxic lesbian vampires, which I think is a pretty accurate description, to be honest, of the characters and of the plot. Each woman turned vampire has her own relationship with her sexuality. Sabine, who is the oldest vampire in the book, she's turned into a vampire in the 16th century, and she doesn't really have a name or any language to describe her attraction to women. Whereas by the time Alice, who is the character in the 21st century in America, is turned into a vampire in 2019, she has language such as coming out and things like that to apply to herself. She knows and understands that she is gay and has the language to describe it. There are sapphic literature books out there, but they're generally not this type of book. So there are definitely some in the romance space, which isn't something I read a lot of because it's just not my genre. To have a book published by somebody with as high a profile as VE Schwab, the capacity that she has to write such beautiful prose, really made me wish that there were just more books like this. That Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil wasn't so rare, because it is very sadly very rare to find a book of this type that centres queer female relationships in mainstream publishing. It shouldn't be, but it is. Having said that, queer fiction has come a long way just in my lifetime. When I started reading what passed for YA at that time, I don't think I even came across any side characters who were queer, to be honest, let alone books that centred those characters. And even as I started reading adult fiction, it just wasn't there. And now, which is a really good thing, it is quite common to see a queer relationship, a queer character in TV shows, in a book's background, or indeed the foreground. But most of the time, those relationships are male. There's a Medium article by a person called Jess Ortiz, I'm not sure how you say it, about queer representation. And she says that there aren't nearly as many lesbian relationships portrayed as there are gay relationships. And though that article was published in 2017, I don't think much has changed since then, to be honest. And just last year in 2024, on the Out Now website, and I will link all of these things down below, Jessica Rose wrote about book recommendation videos on TikTok, that in those videos the word queer seemed to be synonymous with male loving male MLM. Every single video was full of nothing but MLM novel recommendations. It's an issue that's persisted. I think there is hope for more and better representation. I read a dystopian book a few months ago which also centered a queer female relationship, which I loved, and that was a book by Reid, and it's called Fable for the End of the World. It's set in a world where debt is used to control the population. Climate change has damaged society. Reality TV has become something deadly. So think kind of the Hunger Games. The central relationship is between 2 women. And Reid does write it really beautifully, and as I say, I really loved the book. And I think there's the sapphic side of it that I really loved, and I think just the dystopian element of it, this idea of the world being controlled by debt, and I attended a virtual event with Ava Reid in conversation with Alison Saft, and it was through Waterstones. Ava Reid had obviously just written a sapphic book, and Alison Saft's next book was also going to be sapphic, and they both spoke about those books being less popular and kind of feeling like they were shooting themselves in the foot a little bit, that they weren't helping their careers by writing those characters and stories. And I can't help but wonder how many stories have gone untold because the author fears writing queer female characters, how much representation we could have if, as Elle from a blog called Elle Examines says, a lot of authors and readers have decided that it's okay to just not be interested in sapphic lit. And I can't help but wonder how authentic, loud and proud representation of sapphic relationships both in books and on screen would improve lives. Jessica Rose, who was writing on the Out Now website, explained on that article that she didn't come out until she was 16, purely because she never understood that loving women romantically was even an option, and she attributes that to a lack of representation. My unawareness was largely due to the lack of positive representation, she says. And VE Schwab herself didn't come out until she was an adult either. She wrote an article on Oprah Daily a few years ago which explored her coming out story, and she writes about what her early perception of what gay looked like for a female. And she says, "Gay is only one of two things, butch or lipstick, and neither of those fit." She also writes that later, after she came out as gay, she wondered if she was gay enough because people always seemed surprised. In a separate Esquire article talking about the TV show she created for Netflix, which was First Kill, Schwab explains that if I'd seen myself on screen when I was 16, it might not have taken me an extra decade to come out. She discusses the lack of queer characters in TV shows, and the ones who got screen time were side characters, and so rare that there was no real diversity among them. Because there was a lack of representation in female queer characters, Schwab's ideas about who she could be were limited too. Completely coincidentally, I've read Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil at the same time as a YouTuber that I've followed kind of off and on for a few years was talking about her journey towards coming out as queer. So the channel is Unjaded Jade, and she was a study tuber, and that's kind of how I discovered her. And since leaving university, she's sort of transitioned into more like lifestyle content, I suppose you would call it. But she recently posted a video on YouTube detailing her journey towards accepting that she isn't straight, as well as a couple of reels on Instagram in which she talks about how she struggled to imagine herself in a relationship with a woman because she didn't see that representation. Growing up, she didn't understand that her teenage feelings towards a girl in school could be a crush because she didn't have the representation in the media she was consuming to educate her on what that could look like. Again, so representation does matter. It matters because it teaches us what we can be. Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil centres queer female characters, and it is both a book about their sexuality but also about the lives women choose to live, the agency we take for granted in the modern world that hasn't always been ours, and the vampire is kind of a metaphor for women who don't conform to social expectations, which I really liked that in the book. We need more books that centre female relationships, that show all the different ways that there are to be female and queer, that represent queer characters as whole human beings, not just reduced down to their sexuality. And representation enables people to understand who they are, to live full lives, to feel less alone in the world. So the message is, buy queer books, read them, talk about them, but especially buy and read and talk about queer books that centre female relationships. You might just learn something about the world, about people that you know, and about yourself along the way. And there is a list of recommended reading down in the description box as well. And other than that, all services are listed down below. Fire Witch is out for pre-order. Releases on 13th of September. Any comments, questions, suggestions, thoughts about this kind of topic, thoughts about Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, leave them down below. Like if you like, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time with another video.